companies who are led by people who lack these skills are more on a 5-year plan versus people who have these skills. They got their 10-year plan going.
Wow.
Companies won't succeed for long, or the retention rate will be so low that they're not able to keep the same types of people, because
Exactly, yeah.
leadership is everything.
Hi guys, welcome to another episode of Renewed Minds. It's my great pleasure to welcome back Mandy Morris, great friend of mine. It's been a while. She's a therapist, and we've spoke before on topics doing narcissistic abuse, and we'll be speaking today on emotional intuition or intelligence for the CEOs. If you'd just like to introduce yourself, Mandy, for people that don't know you, just a short few words, that'll be great. Thanks.
Yeah, sure. Thanks. Yeah. Thank you for having me back again. I'll let you go into the back and forth that we have, but we've been trying to do this for like a year now. Which I was thinking it was 6 months, but you're right. It's been close to a year. So we finally made it happen. I really appreciate it. I have a lot of respect for you and what you're doing. So it's an honor to be here. But yeah, I'm Mandy Morris. I'm a LPC, mental health expert. I'm a EMDR clinician, which is a very specific type of trauma therapy. And I also do executive coaching as well.
Okay, that's brilliant. And I think part of the discussion we had initially at the time when you came was on the types of narcissistic abuse. And one thing I honestly believe in is there is surely a life for the person that's been a victim of narcissistic abuse afterwards. And I believe when someone heals from narcissistic abuse, they should also have a phase of their life where they would thrive as well. So that's one of the reasons why I wanted to welcome you back onto the channel, especially with what you do with executive coaching, which I think it's perfectly in line with emotional intuition or intelligence for CEOs. And this could be people doesn't necessarily have to be large businesses, can be small to medium-sized businesses. So I'd be intrigued to just explore initially, just first, in your perspective, Mandy, what is emotional intuition and why is it important for the CEO today?
Yeah. So emotional intuition and emotional intelligence are slightly different. They're very similar, but there is a distinct difference between the two of them. Emotional intuition is more of that gut reaction, the being able to pick up on a sense of something without analyzing it. Something that the more you're in attunement to your own emotions and the understanding, the easier it is to pick up on things. So very much a gut reaction. Now, emotional is the ability. So it's not an intuitive thing. It's a skill. It's the ability to use, manage, and perceive emotions in yourself and in other people. And that requires, a pause, stepping back, analyzing yourself and or someone else. And so it's important for CEOs to have this ability so that they know how their decisions emotionally impact people, and they know what the climate emotionally is within their company or the company that they've had or are building, whatever it may be. And there's these old ways of thinking that there's no room for emotions in business. And even in the last couple of years, that has clearly been squashed a lot. However, there are still people who think that. And so when I'm working with my CEOs, entrepreneurs, high performers, when we talk about this subject, very much to communicate how much it's a sign of strength to be able to do this. And not only that, a lot of people think that we are thinking beings that feel, when in reality, we're feeling beings that think.
Yes.
We will, the emotional center part of the brain, the limbic system, connected right to the nervous system. It goes from the top of your head to the tips of your toes. We have emotional signals go off all the time. The emotion is the name of it. The feeling is where you actually feel it, like in your chest, in your shoulders, in your back, wherever it may be. And companies who are led by people who lack these skills are more on a 5-year plan versus people who have these skills. They got their 10-year plan going. Wow. Companies won't succeed for long, or the retention rate will be so low that they're not able to keep the same types of people, because leadership is everything.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, Mandy. And I think for me personally, one thing that stood out for me, one of your quotes, in which you say, in leadership, you have to put people first. Relationships matter, so to speak. And I think it's so important because at the end of the day, we say human resources. We're resources, but we're resources with feelings. And I think this is one of the most important aspects to realize in business, because at the end of the day, if let's say you're competing with someone on a business deal, and it could just, the main difference could just be who is more likable to that person. It could be literally that, if there's nothing else to compete on. So these aspects are really important, and which leads me to ask my next question on how can one then start to develop that emotional intuition to use it for your competitive advantage in the business world?
Yeah. So it's going to start by, one, recognizing how good you think you actually are at these things. If you're someone who says, well, this is just how I am, that says I am not willing to change or grow in any way. If those leaders who have their own coaches or have their own therapists or have their own support or mentors or whatever it may be, they're constantly growing. We should always be in a state of growing, and empathy can be learned. That is a skill set that can be learned. A lot of people think it's something that you're born with or you're not. Some people are are naturally more empathetic, than others. And then there's the leaders though who think that it doesn't matter, I'm just running how I run them. Like I said in the last question, there's no room for emotional intelligence. Well, I've worked with CEOs before who, when I started coaching, there's even resistance towards coaching because it felt like they were doing something wrong, or it's a sign of weakness, it's like, well, maybe that's part of the problem. But a lot of it is the way in which they interact interpersonally to their employees. A true narcissist is great at sales. Great. They're charming. Think about it in like a gay relationship with one.
Definitely. That's part of the discussion we had, before we started, because you find some of these CEOs to be narcissistic. So that makes a lot of sense.
And but they can't maintain that in the day-to-day within context of a lot of the relationships they have at work. Now, just because someone isn't good at or needs improvement in emotional intelligence or intuition doesn't mean they're a narcissist. So I've worked with a lot of people who, the mindset just was like, well, I'm at work, so I'm gonna put my head down and I'm gonna work. And so the responses are just very direct, a matter of fact. There's no warmth or openness. And so people create these perceptions and assumptions about who you are as a person and a leader because of the vibe you're giving off, the energy you're giving off. And that goes back to learning more about your own emotional awareness within yourself, and then growing that into knowing how to use, perceive, and manage that in other people. Now, a true narcissistic leader is not going to think they have a problem. So they're not going to want to learn.
Exactly. Anything. They're not open to learning. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
and it's going to pretty much boil down to the way in which you cope and set boundaries with, like, if that's your boss, like with your boss, how to emotionally detach from that to protect yourself. Because the people that they'll keep close are the ones that they think are the big team players, and they'll schmooze with them and make them their allies all day long. But only if they perceive those people as the same or higher status. Most narcissists think they are the highest in status.
Exactly. Which makes a lot of sense. And even from that sense of trusting your gut or your intuition, what is that feeling, if we delve into more detail with that, Mandy, in terms of getting that intuition? Is it a sense of maybe the first thing that comes to your mind? Or is it a sense of, say, you analyze something and you think about it? Or is it just, say, like a gut, this is just what I think, this is what I feel? Like, how do we perceive that more to know whether it is our intuition?
Sure. It's a good question. And there's no exact science for it, so I'll give the best answer I can give from what I know.
Sure.
But we have two separate nervous systems. The nervous system that runs from our head to our toes, but then our gut, our stomach, literally has its own separate nervous system. So your body picks up on things before it makes it to your brain. That's part of our survival instincts and survival mechanisms, right? And
body's incredible.
Yeah, it really is. It really is way more intelligent than our own brain sometimes. Actually,
it's a supercomputer.
Yeah, right. It is. The problem becomes is when we start to overthink or not even overthink, but overinterpret or analyze what the feeling is, because we can rationalize away anything,
Okay.
But if you're able to create a pause, and so the ability to learn to become the observer, not the reactor, but the observer of your thoughts and feelings, so that you can kind of take inventory on what's really going on. When you just react out of an emotion or react out of, however you're feeling, that isn't always helpful. Because it could just be a triggered response from trauma or something else.
Exactly. Right.
Yeah. But when you can step back and take a look at it, even if you don't know what it, and I tell people, don't try to overinterpret that. Just, does it feel off?
Exactly.
If it feels off, it's off. And sometimes we need some processing. Like, I know for me personally, I need some time to sit with my thoughts to kind of really figure out things. But if I feel like something's off, then I'm going to go with the assumption that it is, instead of rationalizing my way out of that, unless it's something like I had a bad day and I feel off, versus something feels off with this person or the situation or whatever it may be. Because your mind and body are always trying to protect you. And if it perceives a threat, real or not real, then your body's going to pick up on that. And so I think a good starting point is that becoming the observer of yourself. And from there, learning how to listen to your gut. So many of us have, especially people in positions of leadership, they all stay up in their intellect, their head. It makes sense, you know, for the type of job they're in. For a lot of people, and especially narcissists, they hide behind their intellect and knowledge, and use that as a weapon against people. So that moving from your mind, like the intellect and the ego, to the heart, you don't want to operate just out of intellect and ego. You don't want to just operate out of heart, emotions, and feelings, but the integration of the two.
Okay, that's brilliant. And I think thanks so much for that explanation. I think that says a lot in terms of the fact that you should be careful not to let your emotions also cloud your judgment of the situation. But that's brilliant. Sure. Thank you for that. And one of the other aspects of this that I wanted us to explore is the fact of embracing vulnerability as a leader and being able to say, forgive yourself. Forgive yourself when I say that in the sense that perhaps, you know, you want to be vulnerable to perhaps your staff, to just show them that you're empathetic in that sense. So what are the ways that they can probably explore that avenue to embrace and being vulnerable?
Yeah. So I think, well, one of the main ways and most important ways is to lead in that way, for you to model that sort of leadership.
Yeah.
Because whatever, people aren't going to follow what you say, they're going to follow what you do.
Exactly.
And that's going to make or break relationships in the workplace, which is going to make or break performance, which is going to make or break the bottom line. And just to clarify too, all of us can have some narcissistic tendencies.
Exactly.
And we can be non-empathetic at times with people, or have a perception that the workplace needs to be a certain way, in quotes, meaning that emotions get pushed aside. Those things don't make you a narcissist. A narcissistic leader, we see a lot of them in, you know, these large conglomerates and people in politics, presidents, things like that. But we won't go into. But you know,
we know who we have in mind.
But to answer your question, just wanted to preface that, but to answer your question, is the modeling that and communicating what that looks like. You know, vulnerability isn't just spilling your guts and oversharing. Exactly. You know, it's the ability to communicate your thoughts and feelings in a way that's very honest and real and respectful of yourself and the other person. And, you know, as it relates to your job and your job performance, which home life, personal stuff, if there's things like that going on, that can affect that. And good leaders are going to try to get to know, to the best that they can. Larger companies, it's harder to do this, but try to get to know their employees on at least a little bit of a personal level. And that shows that they care, that shows that level of empathy. But that ability to have a culture where it's okay to say, you know, I'm pissed off at Steve today because, you know, he's not doing his job and he hasn't been for the last week, and talking to Steve about it, and you know, and Steve saying, you know, something vulnerable himself, like, you know, I'm in the middle of a divorce or a breakup, things you would never know about. And then being able to be there and support each other instead of stifling, holding your emotions in, or overreacting. Exactly. When you really need to contain yourself. And, you know, because both will lead to resentment. Yeah, no, definitely. I think that's right on point. And I don't even relate to situations in the workplace whereby, you know, says you just notice, and again, it's listening to your intuition. Just notice maybe some people just making some uncharacteristic mistakes, and it's like, well, you don't know what they're going through at home. They might be going through a lot. They might have a lot in their mind, and you know, it's just showing that care and emotion, like, is everything okay, rather than
castigating them and say, why aren't you doing your job right? And that is just, being present and, reminding them that you do appreciate they are human as well, and not just a human resource.
For sure. Well, and the idea is to grow this type of culture, but it's not always accepted or felt to be acceptable. And people may not receive vulnerability well. And if you're one of those people who are on the receiving end of someone who is stifling or disrespecting or dismissing your vulnerability, then you know that that's someone that you'll have to have boundaries with.
Yeah, exactly. No, right on point. Right on point. Thanks for that, Mandy. And I think also one of the final points I wanted us to look at, which we've touched on briefly, is the fact that, we've mentioned it, everyone's got narcissistic traits. And, when you get into a position of leadership, I mean, with leadership comes responsibility as well. How can one as an individual have that awareness to ensure they don't fall into the danger of becoming a narcissistic leader, so to speak?
Yeah. Well, the minute it becomes all about money, it's a good starting point.
Wow.
The minute it becomes about your power or your growth or your own financial gain, and that, or the image to others, like I want this title because of the title, because of the image it gives me. And those are, I mean, there's more examples, but those are a few main ones that that's the cue. You're going to the dark side, my friend. And to really check yourself on, what you are in service to your employees and to who you're selling your product to, your, whatever the kind of business you're in, that's a service to someone else. Leaders who don't think that their position is not only a position of leadership, but that leadership position is a position of service.
Leadership is service. Yes. Yeah.
Those who don't think that way are more inclined to be in the narcissistic end.
Wow. I honestly think what you just said speaks absolute volumes, because it just shows how easy it can be for anyone to fall into that trap. Once it becomes about money, once it becomes about just your image, and that, you lose sight of what it originally is, whatever the business is that you are doing. I think that's a very incredible point and very profound, that I think people should really take and just think about, because it is really thought-provoking. And I think that's for everybody. That's for everybody. So
well, and just to reinforce that, like really taking time to step back and reflect, like really doing that, because statistically 90 to 93, 95% of people, whatever it is, think they're self-aware, when in reality, like 7 to 10% actually are.
Wow. Okay. That's very insightful as well.
And scary.
And very scary as well. So I mean, definitely reflection points for people to reflect on. But that's brilliant. And what I'd just like to ask you, Mandy, as well, is are there any practical tips or recommendations or things or courses you are running at the moment that can help the CEO to develop that emotional intuition within the business world?
For sure. Yeah, I have a program I walk my execs through, business owners, entrepreneurs, and it's called Leadership DNA. And basically, we break down what your operating system is from a psychological perspective. What are you operating out of? We operate out of belief systems, and this is not a conscious thing that we do, but they get reinforced in our experiences we go through in life. And can't check your baggage at the door just because you go to work. So we got to figure out what your operating system is, because it's going to trickle out. And then we look at what creating this new optimized operating system, sort of software update, if you will. And what are these more adaptive beliefs that you can operate out of, and what does it look like to think that way and to feel that way, and how do you have accountability for staying in that lane. So there's that. I mean, there's any help or support or coaching. There's tons of trainings I do, other trainings out there on emotional intelligence, cultures of vulnerability, things like that. So there's a lot of resources, but as you know, the infamous founding father, one of the founding fathers of psychology, Carl Rogers, says that the curious paradox is only once I accept myself as I am, then I can change.
Oh, wow.
So taking an honest look in the mirror, and
knowing your
growing in certain areas is such a strength. It's the healthy thing to do versus, trying to pull yourself up by the bootstrap and, just continue on doing what you're doing. It's not going to lead anywhere.
No, that's spot on. Thank you so much for that. And what I'll do, I'll also put a link onto the video to some of your programs that we could refer some people to that do watch the episode as well. But yeah, that's been brilliant. I just wanted to thank you so much, Mandy.
Thank you.
Yeah,
we did it. We finally made it happen.